Okay, so I did not put the name of the objectives at the top like I usually do, but objective 79 is solve and graph inequalities. So inequalities are greater than less than. That's what inequality means. Okay? And then objective 80 is graph two variable inequalities. Okay, so that's where you're going to have y equals mx plus b. You're going to have an x and a y in it. Okay, and that's what those two objectives are. Okay, so the first line, you have the greater than or less than. If you don't have the bar below it, then when we go to graph it, it's not a solid line. It's going to be a dashed line when we go to graph it. Okay? And then opposite, if you have less than or equal to, so it has the equal bar below it, or greater than or equal to, then it's going to be a solid line. Okay? Because the equal means it includes the line. So that's what that means. So greater than, less than, and then sometimes has the equals down below it. Okay, then I'm going to scoop this up. Okay, if x is equal to just some number, okay, then that means it's going to be a vertical line. It goes through the x-axis. It has no slant to it because you have no slope. Okay. Same thing for a y. If it was y equals, then it's a horizontal line because it would go through the y-axis. It would have no slope. Okay, and then the next two lines, I'll scoop that bottom one up, is if the smaller part of the sign is facing the variable, you're going to shade below. Okay, and all of this will make sense when we actually get through it. So smaller part of the sign, so as in the less than is facing the x, then that means when we go to graph the line, regardless of how it's tilted, okay, we would shade below. And I'll have colored pencils out if anybody's interested in using those. Some people do, some don't. Okay, and then if the larger part of the sign, meaning greater than, is facing the variable, then you would shade above, because it's above the line. The x's go bigger. Okay, anybody still ready? Good, okay, next slide. Okay, so just remembering parts of our equation that we've already done. So y equals mx plus b, that's our most familiar one that we've been working with, okay? M represents the slope. So remember, slope is what over what? How do we know how to put our rise over run, okay? So y equals mx plus b, the m is your slope, and it's rise over run. Rise is your y direction, run is your x direction. Okay, and then whatever's in the b spot is where it crosses the y-axis. So that's why there's a 1 right here. So there's a 1. That's your first dot. So we make that dot first, and then from that first dot, then we do the rise over run. Okay, so that's why there's a 1 here and a 2 here. Okay, and then as far as your graph, the x line, okay, which one's the positive direction, which one's the negative direction? And then the y line, which one's the positive, which one's the negative? Okay, and then the last thing you're going to add on there is there's something that happens different than if we just had equals. If our last step is to multiply or divide with an equals, like nothing really changes. But with inequalities, if you divide by a negative, then you have to switch your inequality going the opposite direction. Okay? So if the last step in solving inequalities is to multiply or divide by a negative, you're going to switch your inequality the opposite direction. Okay, this next slide, you're going to write it on your graph paper. Okay, and let's not do it right in the middle so that you like have some room. Because we're actually starting on the problem. So. Okay, we good? Okay. All right, so first problem. So number 34. So you're going to write the equation, and I would just write it at the top of your graph paper. A negative y is greater than or equal to x minus 2. Okay, so we want to get it in y equals mx plus b format, right? So really it's there, but there's one thing we have to do before we can actually start graphing. What is wrong with the y? It has a what? Negative. So if you read that very, very last sentence that you wrote, it says the last step, if you're dividing by a negative, we've got to switch our inequality. Okay, so I got to get that negative out of there. So to do that, when I'm dividing by a negative, I'm really dividing by a negative 1. Okay, I've got to switch my inequality. Okay, that's only when you're dividing by a negative. If you were dividing by a positive 2, then you don't switch it. Okay, but when I divide by negative 1, I'm dividing everything on that other side by negative 1. Okay, so now it's no longer greater than. It's going to be less than or equal to. So we switch our inequality. Okay, this is just going to change it to a negative x. But positive 2, because a negative divided by a negative is positive 2. Okay, are we good to there? What just happened? Okay, now we're in the y equals mx plus b. So if you looked at your notes, right, this is the first part that we graph, and it's where it crosses the what? The y. Okay, so this is my y, and it's a positive 2. So I'm going to go up 1, 2, and I'm going to put a dot. So you don't need a very big graph on this first one, maybe a 3 by 3. Okay, that's our first step. Okay, so from that dot that I just made at 2, now I know my slope. So remember, slope is rise over run. Okay, so I have a negative 1 over 1, or you could use this one, which was 1 over negative 1. It's still the same thing, right? Just one of them to rise, one of them to run. Okay, so if I'm using this one right here, this is my rise, this is my run. This is rise over run. Okay, so from this dot, I'm going to rise up or down? Down, because it's negative, right? Okay, so I'm going to go down 1, and then I'm going to run to the left or the right? To the right, because it's positive. Okay, that's once I've done my rise and run, then I put my second dot. Okay, now this is where the lines come in. So at the very beginning, if you don't have an equal sign, it's going to be what type of line? If you don't. If you just had this dash, right? So this is where, like, these will be multiple points. Here's the graph, right? Here's your line, right? Here's a shaded right. Okay, so these will all be multiple points. So since this has an equal sign, it means it's going to be a solid line. Okay, so we just need to connect these two lines to be solid. If it didn't have the bar below it, then we would have dashed. Okay, now we're shading. Okay, so we're either going to shade above this line or below this line. Okay, so this was the part where the shading said if the smaller part of the sign faces the variable, okay, we're going to shade where? Below. Okay, so the y's, this is what's happening. I'm saying what are all the numbers that are smaller on the y, right? Well, on the y-axis, these numbers get smaller because it goes to the negative direction, right? So if this was this, the y's get bigger going this way, right? So that's where that shading comes in, okay? But this was smaller, y is smaller. So that means we would shade like this, okay? And some people, when we have multiple lines, get multiple colored pencils, so this is what's important. Okay, so you get 1 point for graphing, right? 1 point is line right, solid or dashed, okay? And then 1 point for the shadings, right? So 3 points on each of these things. Good? Make sure it's obvious on the solid and dashed. Okay, let's try it again. Okay, this is still on your graph paper. Number 36. Okay, so this is standard form. I don't want to use standard form. Okay, I want to use the y equal to x plus b. So I want to get it. You don't have to write this. I just want to get the y by itself. Okay, so to get the y by itself, I need to move the 5x over to the other side because it's supposed to be on the right side of my equation. Okay, so I have a negative 7y. So I'm not moving that yet. Okay, is less than what? When I move it to the other side.
Negative 5.
Right, it's going to be a negative 5x. Okay, and then I'm just shifting my 35. Questions up to there? Okay, now we're at where the previous problem was at. My y is not by itself, so I need to divide by what? Negative 7. And because I'm dividing by a negative, I've got to switch my inequality going the opposite direction. Okay, so I'm going to divide everything by a negative 7. Okay, and then I'm going to switch my inequality. Okay, so now I have y is greater than. A negative over a negative is the same as having a positive. Okay, negative over a negative is the same as having a positive, but that one actually divides into it going how many times? 5. Questions there? Okay, now we're at our graphing. What is the first dot I'm going to put? The dot where? At 5, right? Because it's always this one that we graph first. Okay, and it's where it crosses the y-axis. So at a positive 5, so you just, maybe a 7 by 7 graph. Okay, I'm going to go up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, from there, this is my rise over run, right? This is my rise, this is my run. Okay, if you didn't want to use this, we could use this, right? Because this and this are the same thing, a negative over a negative. So some of you will switch back and forth because you'll run out of room, like on graph paper somewhere, okay? So from my dot at 5, I'm going to go up or down? Up, if we're using this one, right? We're going to go up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And which direction? To the right, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Second dot. Okay. If I didn't use this one, okay, if I didn't use this one, and I decided to use this one, right, I would go down 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then to the left 7 because it was negative. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if you notice, if we connect those, it's the same line. Okay, so it doesn't matter which one you use. Okay, now the question is solid or dash? Dash. Okay, there's no equals below the inequality. Okay, so regardless of which one you did, you're going to have a dash line. Okay, the part of the sign that is facing the y is the bigger part, right? So bigger is above or below? Above. Okay, so the y's get bigger going above. So we're going to stay above. Oh, my graph is hold on a minute. Yours is in a different spot. So above. Good? Okay, let me know if I go too fast. Okay, next one. Okay, so we can leave it the way it is, or I can flip it if you're used to the y being on the left side. What do you want to do? Leave it or rewrite it? First person.
Leave it.
Leave it. Okay, so I just need to get the y by itself, right? So to get the y by itself, what's the one thing I have to do? Divide by 5. Do I need to switch my inequality? Right. So really, reading right to left versus left to right, I have the y equals mx, right? I have my slope. I just don't have the what? B, right? So if there's no B, where do you think I put my first dot?
0.
0, okay? So really, this is what this reads. Okay, so that's your B. There is a B. Okay, so we start at 0. So that's our first dot. Okay, from there, I'm going where? Down 3. So 1, 2, 3, and to the right. Not 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Solid line or dashed line? Solid, because it has the equal. Okay. Okay, now we're looking at the y, not the x. Okay, we're looking at the y, because normally y is on the other side. The smaller part of the sign is facing the y. Okay, this part right here is facing the left. So if the smaller part is facing the y, am I shading above or below? Below. So why is it smaller this way, right? So that's my shading coming up. Because the y is getting smaller going this way, so we shade below. Okay, next one. It is a bit different. We don't have a y in this equation. Okay, so this one does not have a y, so you're not going to isolate the y because there is no y. So we're going to isolate the x. So to get the x by itself, I'm going to do what with the -7? Add such, right? We don't switch to inequality. It's only when you're multiplying and dividing. Okay, so I'm going to add 7, add 7. So x is greater than or equal to, you don't switch the sign. Okay, to what? -6 and +7. 1. Okay. All right, so in your notes, it said when you don't have y equals mx plus b, if it's just x equals a number, then it's going to be a vertical line. Okay, so it's just going to go through the x-axis at where it says. Okay, so my x-axis at 1, it's going to be a vertical line. Now, is it solid or dashed? Solid. Okay, so you're just going straight up and down. Okay. Has no slope to it because there's no y equals mx plus b. Okay, but we still shade it. Okay, so now this time we don't have y in there, so we have the x in there. So x is greater than. So would that be going to the left and the numbers get bigger, or to the right? To the right. And they're saying x is bigger, so you're going to shade to the right. So that's the part that's facing the variable, is the bigger part of the sign, so the numbers get bigger to the right. Good? Okay. A little bit tougher. Just one more after this. You're good? Okay, so we need to simplify this down before we can start moving things. Okay, so the first step would be to distribute this to both of those. So we would have 2x minus 4. Get there? Okay, we need to get the variable, because there is only one variable versus the y and the x. We need to get the variable to one side. Okay, so it doesn't matter which we move. Usually we're used to the variable being on the left side, so that's just not going to do that. Okay, so I need to move this over to the other side, so that means I would subtract 2x, subtract 2x. So now I have 2x minus 1 is greater than a negative 4. What would be my next step? Add 1 to the other side. Okay, so now I have 2x is greater than a negative 3. Last step. Divide by 2. Do I switch my inequality? No, because the dividing is not negative. This is negative, but that's not the one I'm moving. Okay, I'm moving to 2, so I do not switch my inequality. Okay, this is another vertical line, so I need to know kind of an approximate area of where that would be at. So that's at a negative what? 1.5. Okay, and it's a vertical line again. Okay, so here's a negative 1, here's a half, so I would just put my dot there. Oops, let's see. Put that dot right there. Okay, solid or dashed? Dashed. So it's a vertical line, because there is only an x, there's no y in it, so there's no slope. Something like that's dashed. It connected. Okay, am I going to shade to the left or the right? To the right, because x is greater than, so x gets greater that way, it gets smaller this way. Oh my gosh, we would shade like this. If my graph was small. Okay, we're good? Okay, this one's officially the hardest that it gets. Okay, so 6x plus 6 divided by 7 is greater than a negative 6. Okay, so my first step to get the x by itself is I need to get rid of that 7. What is the opposite of what is happening there? Multiplication, because right now it's divided by 7, right? The opposite of divide would be to multiply. So I'm going to multiply on this side. Whatever I do to this side, I need to multiply on this side. Okay. So these guys, I really don't need to multiply. These guys would just cross cancel. Okay, because that's what we're doing is getting rid of it. So I would have 6x plus 6 is greater than what?
Negative 42.
Negative 42. Okay. Okay, solve for x. Minus the 6 to the other side. Okay, so now I have 6x is greater than the negative 48. Last step. Divide by 6. Do I switch my inequality? Okay, so x is greater than a negative what? 8. Okay, again, I don't have any y equals mx plus b, so it's going to be what type of line? Vertical line. Okay, so I did negative 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Solid or dashed? Dashed. Okay, and am I shading to the left or the right? To the right, because the x's get bigger as they go this way, right? It gets smaller as they go left. Okay, so one spot is it right, graphed right. Second, is it solid or dashed? And then third, did you shade on the right? Okay? Okay? I don't think that was hard. It's just okay, so I will give you the notes, tell you which ones to cross off, and then we will grade this tomorrow at the beginning consult. 31, 32, 33, 34. 31, 32, 33, 34, 36, 41. Okay, so there's only one like that one that is on there, so that's the freshest in your mind, and the fact that it's up on the board is number 50. Okay, that's the only one that's like that. Very good. So the rest of them you should have. Okay, so on your notes for now, I'm just going to have you sketch, okay, a location. So I'll just say it's someplace over here. It doesn't have to be exact graph paper wise for this first one. When we take the test, I'll make you graph papers, make it nice and pretty. Just by then. Okay, so you can just draw little small ones like this and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and make your line and dash. Okay? Step up. Okay, go for it. Nothing.